Good morning. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your day. My name is Tom Pope, and I work in our Treasury Services area. I have been here at Park Bank for 18 years. I have been in banking for over 25 years. So some of the things we're going to talk about and some of the things that we will mention are actually coming from experience that we have seen, as well as the best practices. Ray and I were talking this morning. We are going to be repeating ourselves on a few things, and it is done intentionally because we feel it's very, very important. I'll have Ray introduce himself.
Hello, my name is Ray Koepcke. I've been with the bank for just over 11 years in the Treasury Services team for just coming up on 4.5 or so. We're glad to be here, glad to kind of share our lived experience, as well as kind of give you guys some updates and some tips and tricks for the future here. Happy to be here.
Great. So Ray and I are going to go back and forth as we're talking. However, please, if you have any questions, comments, please put them in. That makes it a lot more exciting for us. So if we can have this as a dialogue. So when we see best practices, what do we think of? Well, in the banking world, we think of fraud. So what is fraud? This is a direct quote from our friends at the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. It's deceit, it's trickery, it's an intention to a perversion of the truth in order to induce another to part something of value or to surrender a legal right. It's a trick. It's an act of deceit. We see that, unfortunately, a lot. Or it's an imposter. It's somebody who is pretending to be somebody that they are not. Unfortunately, we see that a lot as well. So in the banking world, we see all sorts of different fraud. We are going to focus today specifically on check fraud, ACH fraud, and wire fraud. However, we do not want to discredit credit card and debit card fraud, nor do we want to discredit something called corporate account takeover. In the banking world, you might hear it called CATO. In the banking world, we also have a lot of acronyms. We did our best we possibly could to minimize acronyms or at least explain what they are. However, if something did slip through that we did not explain what it was, please stop us and let us know. Any questions before we move forward? All right.
All right. So the first section we're going to cover is check fraud. So as you can see, again to reiterate from Tom saying, we're going to go down to the pretty basics here. So you probably heard this before, but we are going to go through kind of the whole bedrock of all these three different options here. Check fraud is the use of paper or digital checks to illegally gain funds. Most commonly, you see that by forging a signature. I'm sure you've seen stories or have experienced that yourself in your organizations. Hopefully not, but I'm guessing a lot of you have, especially on the stolen signature lines as well. Altering a check to be for a different payee or amount, or writing a counterfeit check from a non-existent account that somebody made up. Before we kind of jump into some more nitty-gritty things here, we have some little bit of fun facts about the check history. They've been around for a long time. I mean, the ancient Romans were seeing back as far as the 4th century, and then mostly used in the Western world starting in the 1500s in Holland. Due to being handwritten, they are highly susceptible to fraud just because of the way that they are, have been made in the past. Liability is a big question for a lot of folks. Typically, it's the bank or financial institution that accepts the check. However, there are some cases it rests with the individuals or business, depending on the exact circumstance. And if the financial can prove its lack of due diligence for the alteration, if it is a major factor there, if the person signed a blank check, typically the other person will be held liable for that loss. So we went over check fraud, ACH, and wire as our main three topics. However, next to debit card and credit card fraud, it is the most common type that we see and the industry sees across the board. Just due to the fact that it is a lot more avenues to alter a check, especially, we're talking, full conversion, full signature fraudulent things of that nature as well. And then 1.2 million bad checks go through the check processing system every day. I don't think people realize the scope of check fraud. We've seen a lot of it, especially over the past, let's say, I guess now 4 to 5 years, right? But the losses are incredible. I mean, it's 21 billion in 2023 alone, and a lot of that goes unfound and unrecovered. So some avenues of fraud, or check fraud specifically, letter carriers being robbed. I mean, letter carriers, as a live person versus compared to, a mailbox as well. It's only skyrocketing higher as the years go on. Seeing the scale from 2018 to 2022. We have a lot of mail theft coming through from, industrial parks, some mailbox, not just live letter carriers, but it's rampant. A postal carrier in DC themselves stole checks due to the the industry that they're in and the situation that they were in, over $1.7 million. And again, to touch on the industrial park area, there's a little anecdote here. So you think of, your work week may end, maybe not for this group, but your work week may end on a Friday, right? But industrial parks, and business parks, things of that nature, they're still around on the weekend, right? And their mailboxes are open, and maybe not somebody isn't going to be around to check on things during the weekend. Somebody drives up through, a park of that sort and takes, some mailboxes, opens some mailboxes, takes some checks, takes some bill pay checks, takes some invoices, things like that. And that's all they have to either use those checks in a wash or to use the data on those checks to recreate as much as they want. So very common methodology there. So check use is declining. However, businesses still use it for 3/4 of their B2B or business-to-business transactions at the average cost that you can see on the screen of $4 to $20. We want to think that ACH and wires and Zelle, Bill.com, all these things are kind of taking over for the better, right? Which is what we usually hope for. But as you can see, checks are still very highly used. And of those businesses, over 80% have reported dealing with that in the past year. And the average quote unquote loss that they see is around $2,400. And that may not be much to some organizations, but for some folks on this call, I believe, and definitely myself personally, that's a lot of money. So I think even that small amount, or comparatively small amount to the numbers you see in headlines, it's still impactful, I'd say. And again, as I said, the past 3 to 4 to 5 years, it's exploded since the pandemic for a variety of reasons. But a lot of those new fraud avenues are from new entities, right? So a lot of the forged checks are drawn on accounts that are less than 1 year old. A lot of those accounts were open during that time, for better or for worse. But we're seeing a lot of increased fraud on those transient or new accounts. So scam artists often come up with an excuse for giving someone a check written over the amount. And I do want to pause here and say that, we are, full-time in the financial industry. There are people that are full-time trying to defraud the financial industry. That is their full-time job. And that is not something that they do part-time, right? It is they're putting resources into it just the same as we are to try and curb that activity. They often convince the victim to give them a chain for the extra amount. I had a case back when I was working in one of our retail branches that a person had, they paid for a sink on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, whatever the equivalent was, and they handed them they got a check in the mail for something, $1,200, and it was $400, right? And the person said, "Oh, just kidding, I wrote you the wrong amount. Send me back that the remainder of that check, and I'll send you the with the sink," or whatever the case may be, right? The teller found it, called the guy, and it was like, "Hey, this doesn't make any sense." And he's like, "Oh, I don't know what I was thinking," So it's these things that come through these small amounts. The check ends up being not good, and they lose those funds. So,
yeah, that was the example that I was going to bring up. We had a nonprofit right around the end of the year when lots of donations are coming through, and they had this donor who was just adamant, a new donor to them. So that was the first warning sign. Second one was they called and said, "Hey, can you get that deposit in fast so that I can make sure that I get my tax deduction." And then the third thing they called back and said, "Oh, that check wasn't supposed to be 2,000, it was supposed to be 1,000.
Yep.
And everybody's radar went up. And sure enough, if we would have sent that $1,000 back to them, they would have gotten that. Plus they would have canceled the check. We would have been out $3,000 plus bank fees. And so just for all of you out there, and that was 2 different clients that experienced that. Thankfully, we all had our radars up, but just something to be very cautious of, those people who are going to call you and say, "Oh, my check was for the wrong amount." Be very suspicious when that happens.
Yeah, we had some of the exact same activity occur on multiple clients. All happen to be nonprofits for some reason.
Well,
And again,
they think we're an easy target. I mean, honestly, and
right.
that's we're not going to be.
I know we probably have a lot of EDs and leaders in this call here, but obviously you see a new entity to you wanting to donate a large sum of money. Obviously, your first instinct is to say that sounds great. I'd love to have these funds as a benefit to us. But as you look further, they're asking for things that most people don't ask for. They're asking for specifics. They're asking for things starting to be amiss with the transaction. And like Nick said, it's important to keep your guard up at all times, even if someone wants to give you 10 grand. Yeah, so kind of moving back here, counterfeit checks. It is a fake check that is used or that looks genuine, but may or may not correspond to the legitimate account. That's our most common, one of our most common avenues there. Common ways to commit check fraud, and I'm going to preface this by saying this is not a educational class for committing check fraud. However, the most common avenues are going to be, we've all seen Catch Me If You Can, I hope, right? Chemical washes, we have photocopying, stolen account information. That's the one I wanted to touch on with that industrial park, reference is if I take a check out of the mailbox for you, I have your routing or for somebody else rather, I have your routing and account number, right? I mean, people think checks are, these sacred, objects, but the routing numbers are public information, right? Account number is typically not public information. But if I have those two things, if I've ever paid you with a check, you have my info, you can do whatever you want with it, right? So that's something to keep cognizant of as you go through here. Forgery and then counterfeit checks and altered. Those are the kind of the bottom two of the most ones we see, at least in our world. That's kind of the whole gamut there. So some actual scenarios. I think Tom has one he wants to go through here first. These are real experiences. We see check fraud pretty much every 2 days, I'd say here, if not every day, just due to the amount of clients that we have touch points with every day. But I think Tom has a couple of things he wants to go through here.
Yeah, Nick actually hit a great point on one of them. And what we were seeing, and unfortunately is right around the holiday, started around Thanksgiving, is our clients were receiving random $4,000 checks. And then all of a sudden they would get an email, oh gosh, we have a new AP person. They weren't supposed to do that. Please wire us $2,000 back. But what a lot of people don't look at or didn't look at is it's going to a completely different financial. So as to Nick's point, they would have been out $6,000 at that point. So if you're getting something that you aren't sure of, please don't hesitate to call your contact at your financial. If you have one there, look at who the check is from, see if it's valid. That's what I ended up doing with this one client that reached out to us. I called the person on the check, the actual check holder. And I said, you probably wondered why you're getting some call from some person in Madison, Wisconsin. They were up in the Twin Cities. And they said, I have a good idea. So they were about a week and a half into this fraud. So please be cognizant if you're not looking for something. The fake LLC that's on there, we had that with a client about 2 years ago. And what happened is they wrote a check out to a legitimate company that got intercepted along the way. And those people that intercepted the check created a new LLC in a different state and deposited the check. Eventually, we were able to, we worked with that financial and we got the funds back for them. But again, these are things that we're seeing from checks that are being stolen or washed.
And some other points on that for the turnaround time. There's one specifically a couple of years ago. Depending on the bank that it gets deposited at, this one I believe was and it ended up at a Chase branch in, I think, Minnesota, I believe, Tom. But the turnaround time for that was around 6 to 7 months to get those funds recovered, right? And I'm not saying that it's not going to happen depending on the situation, of course. We have to realize that the check fraud, it isn't an instant fix if it gets found, even if it gets found, right? Or even if it gets, both banks are aware of it, you're aware of that the fraud happened. Sometimes it takes these larger banks, Chase, B of A, BMO, those things like that, multiple months for their fraud teams to not admit, but, release those funds back to you and back to the client. So in this case, I think it was around $34,000, which is a large chunk for a lot of people. And luckily this organization could function without having that essentially in their pocket. but it took 6 months for those funds to be recovered, and that can impact a lot of folks for that, for that time frame. Yeah.
And before we move forward, I'm just going to pause really quickly on the altered check payee line. Just to think about that, we're going to come back on this one, but this one's really important because another alteration that we're seeing is if somebody intercepts a check, what used to happen is a lot of times the whole check would be completely rewritten. The dollar amount's just egregious. It doesn't make sense. What we're seeing now is that payee is being washed, and just the payee is being washed. Everything else within the check is staying the same. So we'll come back as to why that is so important about a product that's available that can help deter any of that. Before we move forward, any questions?
I assume you'll be talking about ways to thwart some of the things. Okay, I'll
Correct.
Bite my tongue for now.
Correct. All right. Yeah.
Yep. Tom's going to go into ACH now.
Yep. So what is ACH fraud? So what it is, it's illegal use of the ACH network to steal money. ACH, for those of you that aren't familiar, it's just the automated clearinghouse, is the financial network that allows electronic funds to transfer in between financial institutions. So just like with checks, we're going to do a little fun facts on ACH. So the automated clearinghouse ultimately began back in the late 60s in California because, of course, with bankers who were concerned about the volume of paper checks. Around that same time, the American Bankers Association sponsored a study looking for ways to improve the nation's payment system. In 1972, ACH Association in California was formed, and in 1974, NACHA, the National Automated Clearinghouse Association, was created to administer ACH network. I'm going to pause just really quick. Why ACH has been such a tremendous money movement. When I first started in banking a long time ago, there was 8 different Fed districts across the United States. Now they're down to 1. Most of that is because of ACH. But to also reiterate to what Ray was saying when he was talking about some of those fraud numbers, just think that is all clearing through one Federal Reserve. It's crazy the amount of fraud that we're seeing out there. So a couple more ACH fun facts. Although ACH transactions are considered safer and more difficult to compromise, which is true, fraud can still happen. And we'll come back to that in just a minute. 33% of organizations were subject to debit fraud and 20% were subject to credit fraud. So let's pause on that for just a minute. Debit fraud makes sense. A lot of people get confused and understand, how does credit fraud happen? Well, when people just suddenly get these funds in their account and they don't notice it, and then things can start coming back, and it's just really bad situations. We are seeing that happen. We don't see it as much as we do debit fraud, but an example of a credit fraud would be a lot of those small deposits. We have one client that has a specific account that they only use for any type of ACH transactions, and they will once in a while get those small micro deposits of 57 cents, something like that. If you see those that don't make sense, we can return those. So please contact your financial. And why is that important? Because a lot of times what people do is they are testing to see if an account is valid or not. So then if they're testing an account with those valid micro deposits, I have seen this, that all of a sudden a larger deposit comes out. Okay, and as Ray alluded to, routing numbers are public knowledge, but all that's needed to create an ACH transaction is an account number and a routing number. And with most business-to-business ACH transactions, you only have 24 hours to contest an unauthorized ACH. There are some exceptions to that. I won't go into the details of it, but just please note, this is very, very important to monitor your accounts. And again, we'll talk about some products that are out there that can help you with that. So how does ACH fraud happen? Well, stolen account information, and then phishing scams. That happens a lot as well. And I know that Nick mentioned that in the beginning. Think of what's happening with that. You get these emails, you click on a link, and all of a sudden somebody has full access into your account system, especially if you're in any type of online banking. Please, please, please be careful of any of those type of emails that you're just not familiar with. Fake invoices. Invoices, you get an email out of the blue that says, geez, you need to pay this. We've been trying to reach out to you. You haven't sent us any money. Address this immediately. And then people will just blindly click on the link and then they enter information. And then that's where the fraud kicks in from there. And then lost or stolen debit cards that are not immediately reported as missing. Again, anytime you notice something, a credit card, a debit card, you even feel that your account might have been compromised, please reach out to your financial institution. So scenarios that we have. So emails with new account information. This is probably one of the bigger ones that we see. And the best example that I have for you is this. We have a client that was using our ACH for payroll. They got an email out of the blue from one of their employees that said, I've changed my account number, here it is, and they went and changed it. Payday came. They got a call from that employee. Where's my check? Like, well, you emailed me with your new account information. No, I didn't. So please, I can't stress enough. If you get an email updating any type of account information, please pick up the phone and contact that person at the number that you have on file for them, not the number that they have or that they included in that email. Stolen checks. Again, all that happens is you have that account number. So it goes hand in hand with this next one here of legitimate check getting in the hands of bad people. So somebody wrote me a check, and I use this example a lot with our clients. Somebody wrote me a check and it's a valid check. But what people don't know is maybe I have, I don't know, a side hustle on the side and I like getting a whole bunch of credit cards and go buy things. Or where I live, a spouse, a roommate, a friend got a hold of that check as well. So what we do see, and we are seeing here, at least at Park Bank, is we are seeing bad transactions posting to people's accounts from Discover, from American Express, from Capital One, because what's happening is they have your legit check, they have your account number, and then they're logging into Discover, Capital One, etc., and paying that card online using your account information. Again, we'll come back with some things that you can do to protect yourself from that. And then scam emails, random emails. And Ray and I were kind of chuckling because as we're putting this together, is literally last week, I got this email. And this is exactly what we were talking about. And that the highlight there, the ACH scam attempt, overpayment of $38,410, that was the message that I received, overpayment of $38,410. I did a snippet of what the guts of the email were. So it says, we've been trying to reach you for multiple attempts for 60 days. Nobody's been trying to reach me with any of that. View the full document right there, big yellow. You click on that. When you click on that, that's what can put some of that key logging information in your computer. That's what can put some of those other viruses in your computer. That's exactly what the scammers and bad guys, if you will, are hoping that you will do. So if you guys see anything like this, delete it, contact your IT people, make sure it is okay. But even if it looks okay, I still reach out to our IT department a lot. I'm not going to speak for Ray, but I'll speak for myself. I do receive emails that don't look right. I'll send them over to our IT people. I'd much rather be safe than I'll suddenly blow your computer up. All right. Any questions with ACH or ACH fraud before we move forward?
Or any examples of good or bad?
Yeah, if anybody wants to share anything they've seen, please do so.
Either in the chat or vocally, whatever's best. Please interrupt us at any time.
No? Okay. Well, we'll move on to wire fraud.
All right. So our major third pillar we're going to discuss today is, before we get into the preventative measures, is wire fraud. You know, that's the word you hear in these, federal cases, Supreme Court stuff. You see, oh, so-and-so got federal wire fraud charges, right? However, today we're going to talk about actual, explicitly wire fraud, lowercase. It's a criminal act of, trying to fraud or attempt to commit wire fraud with the aid of some sort of electronic communication. That's the big kicker there. So, some bullet points to consider with wires. You may or may not be familiar with wires in general, but they are kind of the most extreme payment method, right? It's typically same day, usually same day. Most likely used with real estate transactions or larger transactions in general. Most common method for sending money internationally, which is a big bullet point here. It is an immediate transfer. Immediate meaning, it could be 20 minutes, it could be, a couple hours, but it is typically that same day, and very hard to recall. What we mean by that is that the other bank has to play nice, right? So once your bank releases that wire to the beneficiary, the recipient, they are under no obligation to send those funds back to you unless you have a good reason, for them to even respond to your message, right? So it's very hard. Unlike an ACH or a check, there are some couple of options for recourse there. That is not the case on the wire. It is entirely in the hands of the bank that received the funds to even respond to you or, play nice in that regard. Some things to consider as well is, does the destination make sense for the location of your vendor? I'm going to briefly pause here and do a little early anecdote. We had a organization that was buying a crystalline glass, like behind the bar kind of display from, I believe it was a vendor in Mount Horeb, right? So they were a couple $1,000 looking to wire the money to them. Vendors in Mount Horeb, like I said, they get the invoice, and the bank is, back when SunTrust was a thing, SunTrust down in, Phoenix, Arizona, right? So, I mean, yeah, the Mount Horeb vendor could have banked in a bank in Arizona and have the right number match, but, the client was like, hey, why am I sending money to SunTrust? It doesn't make much sense for a local vendor. And it turns out that, we caught it at the bank level and questioned the guy, and he called his vendor and he's like, I haven't invoiced you yet, right? So these things can happen as small the transaction as a couple grand. People put the effort in to receive $3,000 of their money, fraudulently, but all it took was one phone call from our client to his vendor to confirm that was a fake invoice and a fake request, right? So their email had been breached at the vendor in Mount Horeb. They're sending out fake invoices to their fake bank, or real bank, but fake destination, and it was just that easy, right? But it got caught at a couple different levels, which was great. Again, the bottom bullet point: when in doubt, call, especially for a wire transaction. Typically, you're going to get instructions via PDF or hopefully not just an email, but usually a PDF with wire instructions. And typically, a lot of those instructions are going to say call to verify, which is what it's so important because it's so hard to have recourse on wires. So I know Tom he wants to mention that first bullet point here as a scenario.
Right, the refuse to take a call, kind of going back what Ray said, is when you reach out that one invoice that didn't make sense, reach out to the vendor. We've run into scenarios here where I received an email from a client, something didn't make sense to me, so I tried calling them and I got their voicemail. So I emailed them and said, hey, I want to talk to you about this. Can we call? Or, can we have a call? And the immediate response I got back was, I'm busy in meetings all day, just send the wire, it's legitimate. Well, for me, that was a major, major warning sign. So I stopped the wire, completely held it. I would much rather be yelled at, if you will, versus sending out money that shouldn't go, because as we've mentioned, we can't get that back. We eventually did get a hold of our client. And just like the scenario Ray said, person's email got hacked, got compromised. So always be cognizant of that. If somebody does not want to take your call and they're just rushing you to push those funds through. And the other one that's on there is request from a meeting. Yeah. We've seen that before as well. And it's funny, but not funny. As the story is, there's a CFO and a CEO in a meeting together. And the CFO looks at his email and says, so you want a wire to go out, huh? So clearly that CEO's email was compromised. So please be cognizant and be careful of everything.
I do want to mention as well, in the wire world specifically, typically, banks do have an option for you sending wires yourself via their online platform with a couple speed bumps there. But in the cases where you don't have that set up currently with your bank, wires do take a couple different speed bumps to get out, right? So meaning, is it a call to your bank? Is it a call to your banker? Is it a call to somebody else internally at your organization? Which is why the reason that it's so important to have those speed bumps in there is because these funds aren't easily retrievable, right? And typically they're for super large amounts, like I said before, but make sure you have at least some sort of speed bump in your organization before wires can get sent out. We'll go into a couple things in a few slides here about some ways to mitigate that. But just please, if you take anything away from this meeting or this presentation, is please make sure to do some due diligence and double checking before you send a wire out. Yeah. So Tom's going to go through a couple ways to mitigate things that we've discussed so far.
And Nick, coming back to what you were saying, both check and ACH positive pays are excellent ways to minimize your fraud risks. When I'm talking to the clients that I work with, I look at it as an insurance policy for your account. We have homeowners insurance we pay for. We have car insurance we pay for. Why don't we have account insurance that we pay for? Going back to a couple of the slides, the average check loss, $2,400. We're seeing that and considerably higher. Think of ACH losses. Think of what would happen if you took a $5,000 fraudulent ACH hit on your account. How could that impact you and impact the mission of those that you are working with and serving? This is one of the speed bumps Ray was talking about. Have a wire agreement in place with your financial. That is a requirement here at Park Bank. We will not release a wire without somebody having a wire agreement on file. So what is that? Unfortunately, the crooks are getting smarter. AI is getting much more advanced as well. So if anybody has heard anything what can be done with voice recognition with AI is frightening. So before, several years ago, we used to just call somebody back, verify their voice because we work with them. We don't do that anymore. We require some type of personal identification number, customer identification number. It can be a passphrase, it can be numbers, it can be whatever. It doesn't matter how well I know that person or anybody in the bank knows that person. We cannot and will not release a wire without that information. Strongly, strongly recommend this. If your financial doesn't offer this, talk to them about it. It's not only a way to protect you, but it's a way to protect them as well. Monitor your accounts and not just once a week. Look at them daily. Look at them several times a day. And again, we'll talk about something called positive pay here in just a minute that will help with that. And again, in the beginning where I said we're going to be repeating ourselves intentionally, again, when in doubt, call. If something doesn't make sense, just pick up the phone and call. Use of multi-factor authentication as well. Some people know what those are, tokens. Some people look at like a Google Authenticator can be one as well. It's just a second step verification when you're logging into online. Separate duties if possible. Does the duties that people are doing, does it make sense? Do you have a division that one person looks at something, one person approves it? Something along that lines. If that can be done, we strongly consider doing something like that, as well as develop a relationship with your bank. That's another one we can't stress enough of. Do you know the person that you're working with? Do you have a contact at your financial that you can just pick up the phone and they're going to know who you are and you don't have to explain yourself? You don't have to answer 47 questions to get an answer with anything. That's something that we take pride on, is we have a department here where people can reach out to any one of us at any time. Any questions so far? Okay, we're going to talk about check positive pay. Ray's going to talk about this. This is one of those protections that you can put in place.
I think we do have a question in the chat before we jump into positive pay. So what recommendations do you have for a very small nonprofit, one staffer with separate duties? We can look at it. I mean, we're not here to dictate how you operate, of course. But I mean, if it's untenable for you to check your account every day, I guess that's more of an for N and Nick maybe explanation here. But I'd say if you're a one staffer, I'd say the bullet point that Tom mentioned about knowing your bank is would be number one, in my opinion. Having someone else, again, we're not here to monitor your accounts every day because that would take a million more FTE hours, right? But I think having that relationship with your bank, that they know who you are and they can know any questions, know any answers to questions that you may have pretty quickly, would be of paramount importance, in my opinion. I don't know if Tom wants to extrapolate on that. It's hard to give you a super clear answer to that, but No,
Ray, I think hit it in the head. Just monitor the account. We understand that happens too. We understand that there are some businesses out there that they just don't have the people power to do that. And we understand that. It's just making sure that you have as many checks and balances in place as you can.
Yeah, I mean, put the protections on the bank account, the ACH filters, try to do positive pay with checks. Um, and hopefully you've got a board that where you can use a treasurer to be a second set of eyes on things, maybe reviewing the bank activity with you for you. Those are the only things that I can suggest for small nonprofits, but sometimes you just got to be scrappy and you won't have the full set of controls available to you that a larger nonprofit would have. Yep. Betsy mentioned board treasurer.
Yep. So
Good question.
we're going.
Thank you.
Yeah. So as you see on screen here, we've touched on the word positive pay a couple of times here. So this is the big protector that we utilize for the clients that want to do so. We're going to touch on the check portion first, and then Tom will go over the ACH portion. It's kind of two sides to one coin here, right? So your major avenues of funds leaving their account typically going to be check, ACH, and other avenues that way. But on the check side, Positive Pay works kind of as a filter for outgoing funds from your accounts that you kind of dictate, right? So on the check side specifically, uploading a file of your recently written checks through your existing online banking profile. And before I continue, I want to clarify this. This is how it works at Park Bank, right? So the Positive Pay is a product that multiple vendors can provide to you depending on where you bank. Your bank may use our same vendor. Your bank may use a different vendor that provides Positive Pay, right? So we're going to go through the kind of the Park Bank scheme of things here, right? So on our side, again, you upload a file either through Excel, CSV, or by hand of your written checks that are kind of already out in the wild, right? So as those checks are presented, they're compared to that file that you uploaded, again, either automatically or by hand. And if everything is a match, the check clears, no worries, right? It goes through as if nothing happens, nothing for you to do beyond that point. However, if there's a difference in the information, right? So let's say someone adds a 0 and deposits it, right? Someone adds my middle name or takes away a name and deposits it. If they alter the check number, if they alter the date, things like that, those are the major 4 categories that are looked at. And then it kind of pings back to you and says, hey, this isn't matching with the check file you uploaded to our system. And it sends you an email in the morning, it says, hey, this check image came through. Is this still good or is this not good, right? And it gives you that speed bump. I know we're using that word a lot, but it gives you that speed bump to say this check is different than what I uploaded. I'm going to reject this check, right? So it gives you the tools to, again, Allison's question, to be self-sufficient if you're a solo person, right? In order to kind of screen your checks that are leaving the account compared to the information that you uploaded yourself as valid, if that makes sense. And go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, some of the first fraud that I ever witnessed was somebody writing a check on our account, and it led to Positive Pay. And I'll have to be candid and say, at first I was like, oh, what a pain in the butt to have to upload these transactions after every check run. But the reality is, take the time. Park Bank can help you set up a template so that it imports really easily from most accounting softwares and just get it done. So acknowledging that it'll take a little bit of time up front, but you could save yourselves hours of headaches and thousands of dollars by making sure you do it.
Yeah. And I can speak again for our implementation that we can limit the rights of people, what they can and can't do at your organization, right? So some people have check upload only. I know we're getting kind of in the weeds here, but we'll get out of it quickly here. So some folks can do, check upload only. They can do approval only, right? So if you're the ED or equivalent position, you don't want to be doing this every single day. You can delegate to someone that maybe has minimal bank access, but they can still upload your check runs, right? They can't see your account number. They can't see anything else, XYZ, but they can do a portion of Positive Pay to make sure that these things are still being taken care of. And on the alternate side, maybe only you have approval authority, right? Person A uploads the check runs, but only person B can say, yes, this is good, or no, this is bad. Yeah.
Yep. And I just want to add something really quick. If you remember a few slides back where I mentioned that alter check, and we're going to come back to that, this is where Positive Pay comes in, where I mentioned we're altering the names. Not all softwares will check 4 bases, the 4 points that we do. We check payee mismatch, we'll check account number, the dollar amount, and obviously the check number. So why that's important, again, what we're seeing is the name is being changed. So if your Positive Pay provider does not have payee match, inquire on that, please, because that is something where we are seeing differences. Positive pay, ACH, very similar to check, but it's just a tad different. What that is as things are debiting your account, it gets added to, as Nick mentioned, a filter. And you would pass that list along of clients to your financial as an authorized or approved person. So as, say, MG&E or Wisconsin Power and Light, or somebody debits your account and they're on that approved list, that's great. But if there is anything that's unauthorized, as I mentioned before, Discover suddenly tries to debit your account and they're not on that approved list, that would create a flag for you that you would be able to go in and see, oh, yeah, it's legit. And you can, on our side, you can do what's called add to the rule, which is adding them to that approved list, or you can reject it. Again, why is this important? If you remember from a few slides ago, if a business ACH is done in a certain way, you only have 24 hours to report it. Okay, any questions before we move forward? All right, so what should you do if you have fraud in your account? Contact your financial immediately. I can't stress that enough. Pick up the phone and call them. Hopefully you have a main contact that you can reach out to. Potentially open up new accounts. Place positive pays on your accounts that we just spoke about. Again, it's a really cheap insurance policy. And as Nick mentioned, it is a little extra work up front, but it can save you thousands of dollars down the road. If it happens on your personal accounts, contact credit bureaus. We wanted to put this in here because we also realized that fraud doesn't just happen to businesses. It can happen to you on a personal level as well. Reach out to the 3 different credit bureaus. File a police report. Review your accounts immediately. Contact your local financial and ask them about positive pay. Hopefully they have it. As we mentioned before, have a wire agreement in place with your financial institution. Hopefully we beat this enough. If you don't know who sent you an email with a link in it, please don't click click that link. And if you receive an email to update information, again, pick up the phone and call to make sure that everything is legitimate. And again, call the number of that person you have on file. We have seen this where they'll shoot an email, oh, I changed my phone number too. Don't do that. Some of this might just be really common sense, but again, lock your computer when you're not at your desk. There's fraud that takes place internally as well. Somebody that doesn't lock their computer, you might have access to certain things that somebody else doesn't.
For you Windows users out there, that's hitting that window and L, and that locks your computer for a real quick shortcut. I do it a lot more frequently when I leave my computer now.
Yep. Turn off email or messaging apps during Zoom or Teams presentations that you may be attending or hosting. Ray and I, we're putting this together, we thought about that. How many times have we been in presentations and you see that little email that pops up in the back, or a Teams message that pops up? So why is it important to take that off? Well, I've been in a couple of them where you see the header of what that email is, and it's things that you shouldn't be seeing, especially if it's, fraud that happened, mentioning somebody by name. Be aware of that as well. Slow down. Don't get click happy. I know how busy we all are. I know how busy we can all get. And I know sometimes it's just easier to click on something than to try to take the time and look over it. Please take the time to slow down. Use multi-factor authentication, as we talked about. Use unique, strong passwords. Yes, that's annoying to have a 37-character password with 4 hieroglyphics and a couple of this and a couple of that, but there's reasons why that's there. But also then save your passwords in a secure way.
Yeah, we're using LastPass for our clients. It seems like it's been a good thing, and it also does suggest passwords when you do need to change it, and they are full of hieroglyphics, as Tom mentioned.
Yep.
So it might, I don't know the costs for a small nonprofit per se, but there are a few other ones out there that I'm guessing others might be able to throw in the chat that they're using currently.
At the bank here, we use something called Secret Server that holds it as well. So there are multiple out there. Yeah, don't hold those sticky notes that we all used to have. Don't put them under your keyboard. Don't throw them in your desk drawer. Don't just leave them out on your desk. I've seen it all.
I know I use Bitwarden personally. I think that's only $10 a year. I'm not sure if they have enterprise or if there's even a difference there, but Bitwarden seems to be great for me, just as a personal anecdote, and pretty cheap.
Good, thank you. Monitor your accounts daily. Make sure you've got strong firewalls in place. Be wary of public Wi-Fi. So many people love using the library Wi-Fi, and it's great if you're just doing something really basic, but don't log into your financial institution on public Wi-Fi. Don't give out sensitive information on the phone unless you know the source. We've seen that happen before as well as use dual control. We mentioned this earlier, give position appropriate access for online banking. If you have somebody that all they need to do is pull statements, do they really need to have access to perhaps run an ACH transaction or cut a check through a bill pay service or bill pay provider if that's out there? And as we finish up here, don't give out any sensitive information via text that is not secure. I panic. The number of social security numbers and driver's licenses that I have had texted to me just scares me. Again, that's not protected. Your financial, if they need that information, should have a secure link that you can use. Report lost cards immediately. Shred documents. We've all heard this. We haven't heard it for a while, luckily, but there have been stories you hear dumpster diving where people are going in, pulling out sensitive information of things that should have been shred. You don't want to be on that list or in the news story for that. Use only secured mailboxes. And why is that so important? Is because the number of clients that I have been to on this next point where they're just leaving mail out in the open to be picked up and or delivered that's not even remotely close to where that office is. You don't know who might be coming in and pulling it. As Ray mentioned before with those industrial parks, it's not hard to just pull a check out. A lot of times when we send checks, you see that pay to right in the window. So it's not hard to identify if it's a check or not. Be aware of our artificial intelligence. It's out there. It's not going away. Just be cognizant of it and do things to protect yourself, like a wire agreement. Use black gel pens if you're handwriting checks. Why is that important? That's harder to wash off. I've been to conferences where I have literally seen a check washed off in front of me, and it's really scary how it's done. A black gel pen does make it much more difficult to do that. Pick up mail timely. Don't let it sit out there. Unfortunately, the crooks are getting smarter, so please be cautious. I'm going to pause. Does anybody have any questions?
Lots of great information here. It's a necessary evil to be on our toes with monitoring our cash accounts. If anybody's got any stories to share, I think, like I said, that one that I came across this past year, right at the end of the year with the giving season, if you will, for nonprofits, hit a few different nonprofits, and it was kind of scary. And I'm grateful that we all had our antennas up, and so just use your spidey sense, and you can't be overly cautious. I don't think anybody would fault you for sending a payment a little bit late if you do get one of those questionable emails, so that you could be a little bit diligent. They all understand that we've got to make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's. So that's important stuff. I'm not seeing a lot of activity in the chat. Maybe the weather's got everybody's keyboards frozen. That's okay. But I want to say once again, thank you, Tom and Ray, for your time today. Probably not a ton new here, but for me, I don't mind hearing things again and again. So sometimes I need to get hit in the forehead with a brick a couple different times before I actually take action. Just ask my wife. But we do have a gift card that we're giving away. That individual, Kurt from Reach a Child, will be sending a $25 Amazon gift card. It will come via link, and it won't be phishing. So we'll that should be an email that you can expect from us. Everybody, our next session is in March. Becca, are you out there? You want to hop on and remind me what's happening in March?
We have everybody. DayNet coming to talk in March.
All right, day night on the tech side. So kind of related to everything that we're talking about today. We'll talk about all of the things that organizations can think about on the tech side. So watch for that announcement and RSVP so that we can know who's coming along to hear things. So thanks again, everyone, for your time. Numbers for Nonprofits. If you are in need of getting good financials and you aren't operating with a budget right now, or you're ready to prepare for an audit and you don't have what you need, give us a call. I'm happy to talk with you about any of that stuff. So, all right, I'm going to sign off and give you all back 7 more minutes of your day. Have a great one.
Thanks,
Thanks, Nick.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.